I'm going to give you a demo of an AI workflow for repurposing content that saves me hours every week and costs me pennies. It's also so simple to use that this is hardly a demo. It's more like a no demo because I don't have to do anything to use it. I don't have to do any prompting. I don't have to use any apps. I don't have to click any buttons. It just does the work for me without me doing anything. So this is a zero-click content repurposing workflow. I'll give you a quick background on how I found this use case. After the demo, I'll give you the AI workflow design principles that I used to create it, and I'll show you the exact steps I took to create it so that you can create your own. I publish a newsletter every week called the AI Marketing Brief, and it's full of great content, but I'm actually not taking full advantage of that content and getting full benefit from it. And specifically, I hadn't been repurposing it into social content. So by repurposing the content I'm already creating into social content, I can actually grow my newsletter subscriber base, as well as grow my audience on social media. But I didn't want to spend 2 hours every time I publish a newsletter repurposing the newsletter. So I created this AI workflow. So here's a demo. And again, there's not actually much to demo because I don't have to do any work. So basically what happens, instead of me doing something to start the workflow, it starts every time I publish a new newsletter. So whenever I publish a newsletter, this workflow will repurpose it to social content, and it creates native social content for LinkedIn and X. So it's not just copying and pasting the newsletter or summarizing the newsletter. It's actually creating a piece of content that stands on its own and is valuable on its own. And it brings that piece of content into Notion, which is where I manage all of my content. And this is the section where I manage my newsletter. You could bring it into other part of Notion where you manage your content calendar, or another tool altogether if you use a different tool besides Notion for your content management. And so if we look here, this is the name of the newsletter issue that I just published. And then I'm getting 2 versions of social posts. And I'm using 2 different models, OpenAI and Anthropic. And so we can just click in here and see the drafts of the content that it created. The prompts are actually the same. I'm just using 2 different models, and I'll explain that to you later on when we talk about the prompt engineering behind this and how I got here. Yeah, so I'm getting 2 different versions of it from 2 different models. And if I wanted to upgrade this workflow, I would probably create different prompts and get, maybe a 3rd or a 4th different version of the piece of social content. And so I've done prompt engineering so that the piece of social content is in the brand voice and style that I want and in the format that I want. And the content is actually pretty good. And I do a little bit of editing. That's pretty much the standard for AI content these days. But it just takes me a few minutes to edit. By the way, I don't know if you've checked out the content quality of AI writing lately, but it has drastically improved. And Anthropic in particular has gotten pretty good as long as it's given good prompts. So my newsletter is all about news and insights and resources having to do with AI for marketing. And so the social post is basically just a roundup of the top 5 stories, just done in a list format and in an engaging style, just a very brief, succinct summary, and then closing with a call to action where you can go check out my newsletter and read the full newsletter with more in-depth coverage of each story, as well as more stories, and subscribe to get the newsletter every Friday. There are some variations of this workflow that you could set up for yourself to personalize it more to how you prefer to work, the tools that you're using, etc. So you could send these drafts directly into your social media scheduling tool. If you're using one, send it into like a drafts area of the social media scheduling tool. And if you wanted to edit there, I prefer to just edit and manage all my content right in Notion and do it there. So that's why I chose this. And if you're not using Beehive for your newsletter, like if you're using something like HubSpot, that works also. You might also want to get the draft of the social post before your newsletter goes out. That way, a lot of newsletter creators do a social post before it goes out, and then the call to action is sign up so you can get the stories in your newsletter. That's an option. I chose to just do it after the fact and have it be a more meaty social post on its own that stands alone and will drive more social engagement instead of it just being a pure CTA post. But that was just my choice. You can customize it to your goals and your strategy. So here are the 3 AI workflow design principles that I use to design this workflow. The first is to go direct to the LLMs. The LLMs are, in this case, OpenAI and Anthropic. So the cost of using LLMs has massively plummeted and is trending towards zero, which I still don't think we've all wrapped our heads around just how mind-blowing and incredible that is. I do believe it's like the best opportunity out there for companies to take advantage of being able to use generative AI for almost nothing. And the cost is only continuing to decrease. And the quality is improving. The quality of LLMs, as new models come out, the quality and the power of them only gets better and better. So I'm going directly to the LLMs to take advantage of the power and to take advantage of the cost savings. And so comparing this to using an app, which is kind of like intermediary in between customers, you and the LLMs, the applications cost, and like SaaS applications cost subscriptions. You have to pay an ongoing subscription fee forever to use it. And it's usually at a much higher markup than the cost that the vendor has in order to deliver that capability to you. So by going direct, you save tons of money and you only pay for what you actually use. And the other benefit is just you don't have to learn how to use a new tool. I'm just using Notion. I've just integrated it into Notion. The second design principle here is invisible integration. So the LLM is integrated into the tools that I prefer to use. And in this case, it's Notion. Again, it can be integrated into whatever tools that you prefer to use. Pretty much anything that integrates with Zapier you could use here. Notion does have AI features, but I'm actually not using them. I'm using the models directly, and it's just right here. So I don't have to log into ChatGPT. I don't have to run any prompts. I don't have to log into any new apps. It's in line with my old workflow. So I'm not actually changing the way I work or my behaviors or anything like that. So it just makes it extremely easy to use. No learning a new interface, no, logging into anything new, just super easy. And the last design principle here is personalization. So everybody has slight preferences on how they want to work, how they want to create content in this case. And so I've adapted it to my preferences. So things like it goes out after I send it and the piece of content stands alone. It's integrated with the tools that I use. And it's in my desired style and voice. Here's a quick look at the Zapier automation that makes this all happen. So again, it's triggered just based on when a newsletter is published in Beehive. Now, Beehive actually has pretty limited integration with Zapier. So if you're using another tool like HubSpot, this is actually even easier to do. But with Beehive, just using a webhook to basically grab the link of the newsletter. So every newsletter actually creates a web page. And then that web page is pulled into this workflow. The web page is scraped. The content of it is scraped. And then that content is used in the user message in OpenAI Assistant and in Anthropic. With both of these, you have a system prompt, which includes like all the copywriting instructions. And then you have a user prompt, which is the new newsletter content. And then it takes the output of that and sends it back into Notion, where you saw before, where you get the drafts. Right here, where I manage the rest of my newsletter content. Just to give you a better visual of how assistants work and what the benefits are, this is a user message, and this is the system prompts. It's actually pretty similar to a custom GPT if you've ever used those. But the main benefit here is that you can use the API to send data into it and out of it. And specifically, you can do it using Zapier, so you can automate the steps so you don't have to click any buttons. So you have the system prompt, which is on the style. And then you have the user message, which is the unique content that you wanted to write about, which in this case is my newsletter. All right, now let's talk about prompt engineering, because a workflow only works as well as the prompts within it. If any of the prompts within your workflow aren't working, the whole workflow is going to deliver you poor quality work. You'll get that robotic style that we're all familiar with. Now, in this case, this workflow is actually so simple. It's just one prompt, but it was very important for this prompt to work consistently for me into the future for every newsletter that I publish. So I don't want this to just work on a one-off basis and then I have to like edit the prompt template and be rerunning it every time. I want this to work consistently without me having to update it for each new newsletter that I publish. So prompt engineering was really key. And of course, I want the style to be like actually good. I don't want that robotic AI style. I wanted it to be, in line with my kind of content strategy and voice. So I've covered the basics of prompt engineering on this channel a fair amount already. So I'm going to introduce two new techniques that I use that you probably haven't heard of, which is how you can really, really level up your prompt engineering. The first one is what I call AZ testing, and the second one is back testing. And I've actually created a tool right here in Notion that makes this process a whole lot easier. So let's dive in. So to engineer good prompts, I would recommend starting with OpenAI's prompt engineering guide. So go direct to the source, OpenAI. They understand how prompts work. They wrote a really good guide with 6 strategies and a bunch of tactics within those 6 strategies that will help you get to a really good baseline prompt. And by the way, you don't have to use all of the strategies or all the tactics there, especially for content. Content is actually a much simpler use case than a lot of stuff that people are using AI for. And the guide is, you don't have to pay attention to all the technical details in the guide, but you can definitely use some of the strategies and tactics there to create baseline good prompts or prompt templates for yourself. But once you're using the basics, it really comes down to personal preference and getting it to work the way that you want to work in practice. So the prompt engineering guide is the theory, but you want it to actually work for you. And the only way to see how it works actually in practice is to run the prompts and see what the output is like. So we are dealing with generative AI. It's a non-deterministic system. It creates new things. It has cognition. It does thinking, and actually creates new work for you. It's not following a predefined set of steps. This is different than automation. This is again, generation. You'll be surprised that sometimes you get different results for different kinds of prompts, and sometimes the outputs of prompts are different than you might expect according to your prompts. So you have to do what I call AZ testing, which is generating and testing a variety of different prompts and evaluating the output of the prompt rather than just evaluating the prompt, because that's obviously the end goal, is to get a good piece of content, get a good output from the prompt. So in this case, I'm repurposing content on an ongoing basis. So every new newsletter that comes out is going to get repurposed using this same prompt. And so it needs to work consistently across a variety of inputs, not just one newsletter, not just one input newsletter, a variety. And so the way that you can improve the quality of your outputs ongoing is actually to backtest it onto previous inputs. So this is the second technique, backtesting. So what it means basically is I'm using my archive of newsletters and running those as the inputs and seeing what the prompts outputs based on the past data set. And because the past data set is going to be similar to the new data set, which is my new newsletter. So in this case, my data set is actually just 5 of my past newsletters. I could go up to 10. That would probably have marginal improvements on the quality of the outputs going forward, but actually 5 I think is plenty for this use case. So again, this is personalized to me. So it's basically working with just my newsletter as the input and just the inlines with the style guidelines that I want for the output. So if I was trying to create something that was going to work for millions of customers and different newsletter inputs and millions of different output styles, that would require a much larger data set and much more comprehensive testing. That's a pretty hard technical challenge, but creating a workflow for yourself for your content is actually quite easy. So that's kind of a big power of the AI workflow design work that I do. So the data set is here in Notion, and then we have some automation to plug it into the prompts and see the outputs. And yeah, the input is basically just the content of the newsletter that was actually published. And then I create versions of prompts across different models. So in this case, I'm just testing OpenAI and Anthropic. And so I want to find the best prompt and model combo for my use case. And for some use cases, you can actually get AI to do the evaluation for you. But when it comes to something like content, it's really a lot of personal opinion and subjectivity. And so I think it's best for a human to evaluate. So I started this experiment by creating 3 prompts. I evaluated those, I gave feedback on those, and then I iterated on the prompts and created 3 more prompts. So here's all the outputs. So again, 5 data sets, 6 total prompts, and 2 models. So running all those, and then I have fields for rating and fields for feedback, and I just rate it on a 1 to 5 scale and give my feedback. And then the feedback gets compiled into the respective prompt model combo that it was given to so that I can iterate on the prompts if needed. And then I get a scoring. I get a chart here in Notion, which shows the rating. The rating on the left side, again, was a maximum of 5. And then it shows me the prompt and model combo here on the x-axis. So these were some of the earlier prompts. They didn't score too good, but after I did iterations, they got really good. And the one that scored the highest was actually this prompt. The number for it is automatically generated. And Claude was the highest. So Claude actually got a 5 out of 5. So definitely check out Claude for your writing needs. And by the way, the rating system is not based on, it's not a 5 in the sense that I'm just going to publish it right away. It's a 5 based on this requires almost no editing for me. So it's basically like, I very much believe in human in the loop workflows. So this is August 2024. Maybe the models will improve or we don't need to be in the loop, but I'm not really in big favor of like just automatically publish anything or putting anything like directly into customers' hands without it having a human in the loop. So the rating system is basically like how little editing do I need to do? And then that same prompt on GPT-4o performed the second best. So that's why I chose to use these two combos in my actual workflow, but this could have been different prompts. I could add more prompts. You can do whatever you prefer. The limiting factor basically just becomes like reading the outputs, which actually does become a limiting factor at some point. It is really cool to be able to like kind of work with like multiple writers and get multiple versions of a piece of content created and then be able to choose the one that you like the best. Something that just basically wasn't possible before with human writers. It wouldn't make sense to have a writer do like the same piece multiple times or to work with multiple writers on the same piece. It just wouldn't be economical. And it's also cool, like different writers are better at different styles. So not every writer can write in every style. So it's cool to just like have access to on demand to whatever style you possibly wanted to write on. And it's near instant and near free. So crazy times. Anyway, so this is a quick demo of the prompt engineering that I did for this workflow. And I showed you AZ testing multiple variants of prompts, and back testing those prompts on historical data as a way to predict how it will perform on future data. A couple key points to wrap it up. One is you could absolutely personalize this to your preferences. This could repurpose a podcast instead of a newsletter. It could use different tools like HubSpot instead of Beehive or Google Drive instead of Notion. Go direct to LLMs to maximize your cost savings. Do really good prompt engineering to get it to write in your desired style. Use AZ testing and back testing to improve your prompts. And integrate the LLMs into your existing tool stack so you don't have to take on a bunch of new subscription fees. My company Ethereal does AI workflow design as a service. So if you want a workflow like this created for you on your own tech stack, let me know. Go to ethereal.ai and check it out. So we would do the prompt engineering for you. You don't have to look at any prompts. You just evaluate the output. And we create this stuff all on your own tool stack, so you don't have to pay any ongoing subscription fees to use it. The marginal cost is basically zero, and we can personalize the workflow to the way you prefer to work. Check out ethereal.ai.